Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Private Podcast, where we plug in and explore the intersection of privacy, human rights, technology, and democracy. I'm your host, Derek E. Silva. Today, joining me on the Private Podcast is Suman Kunaganti. Suman is the co founder and CEO of Personal.ai, a new collaboration network that enables a creators community to access creators' time, knowledge, and creativity via their personal AI. Let's head over to the conversation with Suman Kanuganti. All right, and like I said off the top, we've got Suman Kunaganti here from Personal.ai. Suman, thank you very much for spending some time with us on the private podcast today. We appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Derek.
Good. Before we get started, I do have a bit of a cough that all of a sudden started just before we started recording, so I'm going to have to mute myself multiple times throughout. But Suman's here to talk, not me too much, I think, today. So that we should be okay in the end. Can you tell us, start off by telling us a little bit about your early career and your journey into AI? How did you get interested in that? How did you get your first job, I guess, writing it or applying it, that sort of thing?
Mm. Well, my early career is in robotics, not necessarily in the AI, but in the field of robotics. I was actually literally programming robots like down on the manufacturing plants for ABB robots. But like by background, I'm an engineer, and over a period of time, did multiple different jobs at many different corporations, Caterpillar, Qualcomm. But I think the interesting twist for me was this desire or passion towards like creating products for people. I went to Qualcomm and I created like a original TV video streaming before Netflix existed, and then I went to
Mm.
Intuit. I started creating multiple different products. So I think over the past 10 years is when my kind of career shifted into using AI, and my fundamental thesis or philosophy starts with how do I use technology to kind of solve hard human problems, and then AI sounds fit to be inevitable for solving those problems. So yeah, so that's kind of how I got into AI almost 10 years ago now.
Cool. And so then what was the inspiration behind Personal.ai? Was it, part of that thing of solving a problem that, like you said, inevitably leads to AI? And yeah, but let's start there.
Yeah, so you know that passion of like, okay, how do I use technology to solve problems? When I say that, what we what I mean is the problems that are close to human being, that are the problems that are like touching the experiences of people individually, not necessarily to an organization, to a company. So in my previous company, it was about using wearable, using AI, using human to solve this problem of missing visual information for people who are blind and low vision. It's called
Oh,
IRA,
nice.
AIRA. It was fantastic experience because it's all of a sudden like the vastness of the world is suddenly now accessible to people who are blind, and AI was part of it in terms of trying to identify, provide those audio descriptions or visual descriptions. But there's also a human in the loop to fill the gaps when AI fails. So this company kind of carries the same sentiment, which is personal AI. And the sentiment in here is, okay, how do we augment people with their own minds? Because unfortunately, our cognition, our capacity, our time is limited, and the things that we consume, we create are, forgotten. What does it mean to be deploying a technology that literally, extends or scales your own cognition, your own mind, and augments it? So that's kind of the fundamental philosophy around personal AI.
Okay, that sounds cool. And are you the sole founder, or do you have a team of co-founders who are along with you on this journey?
I have two co-founders with me. One is Sharon Zahn. She is a MIT graduate, has done five different AI startups, been doing AI for 15 years now. When I
Oh,
initially started, I was like, I need somebody deep in the AI. At the same time, the characteristics of, this desire to solving from a human perspective, right? Not just like your business efficiency or 10x efficiency. My other co-founder is Christy Kaiser. She is about UX and user experience, about design. What does it mean, AI experiences for people? And she was my, brand and designer at IRA as well. So we collectively came together and said, you know what, this is a hard, challenging problem, and we need these elements of deep tech as well as deep design, passion for solving people from a UX perspective. So yeah, so we came together and started the company in Feb of 2020.
Cool. Sounds like Sharon has really found her niche, and obviously now she's working with you, and so have you with robotics, which obviously leads to machine learning, programming robotics. I was gonna say I've been there, done that. I haven't done it. I've seen it done because I used to work in an auto manufacturing plant back in the day,
Oh,
and
wow. Yeah.
yeah, and that was super new at the time. My dad came home one day and he's like, "Hey, we got these three new robots that do X, Y, and Z, and we call them Larry, Curly, and Moe."
Uh-huh.
Like, of course you do. Um, but yeah, and that factory, yeah, definitely got more roboticized over the years. Still, human component was still pretty strong, but like nobody needed to go inside the diecast machine unless
Yeah.
it was broken.
Yeah.
Basically, everything was automated on that side, and um, testing and stuff like that. You had machines where you just put it down. You're like, I have this part. Do, do, do.
Yeah.
Right, testing for all the
Yeah.
calibration and everything. It was incredible. Like, and that was all stuff that used to be done by hand. But obviously, it was taking away from more productive work that could be automated. When it could be automated. So yeah,
That
I've been
literally
on the
was what I
front
was doing.
lines.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
good, good. I think we have something similar to share over there because I was literally like programming those ABB robots. There's a huge robots and sophisticated robots, like literally picking up the engines, and it was Caterpillar, so these are like heavy duty engines.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, it's like you cannot make a mistake over there.
Well, you can, but somebody's going to pay dearly for it. A person might get hit by the robot because it swings a way that you're not expecting, based on the program or the program that's supposed to be implemented, the set of instructions it gets, or yeah, it could be picking things up and just boom, like hitting them into a wall, or the die cast machine or something, or a machining system or something like that. So yeah, there's all sorts of things that can go wrong if it's done poorly, obviously. But when it goes right, it's a thing of beauty. It's like, yeah,
Hmm.
we could have done this with like four people, but instead we got this
Hmm.
robot, and we need one person to like watch the machine,
Hmm.
and those other three people, at least in my experience, were never let go. They were assigned to different tasks. They were, well, we're
Hmm.
going to make you a machine operator over here. We can expand the plant now with the same number of people. Just, and the
Hmm.
company can make more money, and there was profit sharing involved, and so the end, the
Yep.
the employees actually did benefit from that. But anyway, but I digress. Um, so I've been looking at the website. I've gotten a sign up page ready to go because I really want this. But I have lots of questions first. Like ultimately, like what do you feel like you're trying to achieve with Personal.ai? Like how does this empower, like at least, maybe not today, but you seem to be headed down a path here where this, Personal.ai can actually be used by hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people for a variety of things. Like where do you see this headed here, or what's the goal? I guess.
The goal is literally to scale people. I mean, if you think about what's happening in our current day to day, right? There is internet evolution, and obviously there's a lot of you know content that we have to consume every day. We have creations that is happening every day. There's like a lot more knowledge that is at a fast pace. The learning is not just education anymore. The learning is like a lifelong learning these days. So there is a lot more demanded of us as a people, and there's a lot more communication demands as well as people. But there are fundamentally two limitations. One, we cannot expand our cognition biologically. uh, we only have certain limitations on how do we process information and how do we recall those pieces of information. And then two, the time is never going to be more than 24 hours in a day. That is, you know, that is given, or at least like we don't know how to expand it. So the core vision for Personal.ai is if every individual person has their own model that is continuously learning them in terms of what they're creating, what they are consuming, the knowledge that they are seeking, as well as the knowledge they're creating in their own style, voice, and authenticity, uh, that belongs to them. That's theirs. The idea of scaling a person from time perspective, from cognition perspective, is exponential. So the end goal for personal AI is almost like a extension of our own minds that is trustworthy and belongs to us and not anybody else. And that could, yes, of course, do a variety of tasks, but at the same time, it could also simply augment your own mind in terms of like thinking, in terms of synthesis, in terms of knowledge. So yeah, I mean, my hope is like 10, 15 years from now, like everybody should have a personal AI in their own pockets. And we'll likely see a different form factors. It won't be a bunch of apps in a phone. It will likely be your personal AI in a device that, probably on you, or it's, much more subtle uh, through the eyeglasses or through other wearables. Or, we shall see how the form factors evolve, but that's kind of how we see the world.
So I make an account. Obviously, I know more than enough about ML and AI to know that it needs training. How does this actually work? Am I giving it access to my Twitter account, my email, my Facebook? How does the model actually get trained? And then we could talk about implementation, deploying it out into the world. This
Sure,
fake
sure.
Derek, the digital Derek out into the world. How does the training actually happen? And because I imagine if you get access to all sorts of data, obviously then I have questions about the data itself, where it's stored, how it's accessed, etc. But we'll start with the training side.
Yeah. How it works is essentially like three steps. One is the data that you mentioned. It's always the first step. Given it is personal AI, it is a blank slate when you come in, meaning the data that is going into your account or your model is what it is trained on. It's not like a pre-trained model like a GPT-3 or a general model like Google Assistant, etc. Right? So
Right.
that's the first step. The first and the data gathering, we basically have a bunch of different tools, whether you can think about historical data that you have on your Twitter that you mentioned, or your documents, or maybe blogs, maybe podcasts as well. So we have mechanisms for all those. But the fundamental element of the data aspect is all the data is essentially segmented into what we call memory blocks. And the concept of a memory block is every uh, memory is associated with like some sort of a time. It has some context, some people, some locations, some entities. So it's like a one unit. And if you think about it over a period of time of your life, um, we refer to that as like a memory stack, which is this idea of like a digital representation of your life or your digital world, right? Uh, so that's essentially like all part of the system, and it's automated to the extent where sometimes if you don't want to control it too much, you can basically continuously capture it on a day-to-day basis as well. Second step obviously is the training, but the training user people don't have to do anything. It essentially is training as data goes in, and behind the scenes we essentially have a model. We call it uh, grounded generative transformer, and this model is a combination of like neural net as well as some of the retrieval models, which ultimately surfaces as a conversational interface, as well as a writing slash generative interface that is all happening behind the scenes. The interesting thing is, over a period of time, as your stack grows, your model gets better and better in terms of how much understanding it has. And third aspect is for you to essentially interact with your own AI. That interaction happens as simple as like talking to your AI, like similar to talking to your Alexa, or AI talking to you. It's not like a one-way thing, right? It's a two-way thing because it's your personal AI. So if it understands the context, and if it knows like, dude, like you need to be looking at this piece of knowledge because you are thinking about this particular topic, right? And the same thing happens also when you are like creating content, writing emails or drafting emails, or writing creative content as well. So I think this idea that this is there with you, and it's almost like surfacing the information, surfacing the creativity from your own mind, which ultimately you can think about sharing with other people as well, depending on what scope it is, depending on the team, community, etc.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I could see Derek's available 24/7. It might not be the real Derek, but you can message him any time of day and he'll respond. And that's kind of interesting. Um, it also would be kind of interesting to have just this place where you get to just brain dump, and it will actually turn that into something useful potentially. That would be kind of cool. Like, hey, let's write a book, and I'm just gonna write like verbal
Yeah.
diarrhea, and maybe something comes out. It eventually, something useful comes out on the other end that's actually marketable. which is
Hmm.
something I'd love to do at some point. But right now it means I need to either be super cognizant and like record a voice note or something like that for later digestion. Whether it's some sort of software that actually captures the file, turns it into actual words, hopefully 100% accurate, um, or something more advanced. But yeah, I'm going through the site here, and it seems some really interesting stuff. Um, you have like this whole section about AI and Web3. Um, how did that come about? Are you yourself interested in blockchain technology? You mentioned subscriptions through NFTs and that sort of thing. Like, is that something that came about naturally, or is that like, hey, this is a super cool thing, we can leverage that, let's build it into Personal.ai? Like, where did the original interest come from?
Uh, I mean, we started doing NFTs before NFTs were a thing, in 2021
Mm,
when it picked up the whole thing. So the origination is still the same philosophy of like problem, right? So when we started this company back in Feb of 2020, I've been involved with blockchain for since like 2016, 2017. So I guess as a technologist, if you will, I was pretty, on top of like what's happening in terms of protocols, in terms of foundations, and just generally understanding the AI, understanding the blockchain space, right? Even variable space. But however, when we came together, one of the first aspect of this company is about privacy. It's about control. And as you said, the brain dump, and that's exactly what we want people to, feel free about, right? And that freedom comes with trust, and that trust comes with the control, and that control comes with like the idea of ownership and the idea of privacy. So those are the fundamental principles and foundations that we said is important or it's needed to solve this problem in a way we are thinking about it. So blockchain wasn't an afterthought. Blockchain was a technology choice for us because that will allow us to, with a greater degree of certainty, say, hey, you own your data. You can walk away with your own data if you choose to even not use personal AI. And nobody else has access to it unless you would want to share your key, uh, right? Which is the whole concept behind the blockchain technologies anyway. So
right.
there was I mean, in a way, we kind of struggle to get some of the Web3 people like really understand why are we using blockchain. But for us, it was pretty straightforward. It's like, dude, looks like blockchain is all about data ownership. AI is all about data. We're just simply giving data ownership to the people, and we are creating models on top of the data. It wasn't like rocket science from our perspective because it's how you approach it, which is we have this problem that we want to solve, and blockchain solves it for them. So we will use it. So Web 2, Web
Yeah.
3, it's not about the contention, it's about the right mix of technologies that you have to make choice to create that experience and design it for the experience that we are passionate about, that we think is the right thing to do. So yeah, so that's the whole thing about Web3. But naturally, uh, because fundamental or foundation is kind of built on top of blockchain, we use Oasis Labs for the data stewardship and the audit and everything else.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's where, yeah. So that's our blockchain implementation. But over time, the idea of renting your AI, like you mentioned about AMA, it probably, first of all, you're not available 24/7. The second thing, you know, like the idea of scale, it's hard. Like if you are communicating with like 1,000 people, it's very hard. But at the same time, we want to create that experience that no, this is not an AI bot of like some random thing. This is actually a personal AI of an individual that they trust, and we will communicate with this idea of like personal AI scores and the trust scores. So when you are sharing your AI, that trust will carry to your community, and that's where the subscriptions and the NFT gated access could also come in, because
Yeah.
the idea of the community also comes with trust. Like if people owns my NFT, they will not only have access to me on the Discord server, they will also have access to my AI, which is primarily driven by like me. Like it's my representation. Um, so yeah, it is a natural evolution for us to incorporate like NFT gated access, very similar to subscription gated access. Again, it's a business model that we can implement, and it's uh, uh, unique, and it's also like, gives benefit back to the creator of the AI itself. So why shouldn't we do that?
So, I definitely had questions about where what role does blockchain technology play here? How can we actually ensure the data is private and secure? And I guess you've at least started answering that partially. Is it the Oasis Parcel? Based on their website here, it's the Privacy First Data
Hmm.
Governance SDK, designed to put your most sensitive data to use while keeping it secure and private. Um, yeah.
That's exactly what we use,
Okay.
right? A
So
Parcel SDK. And in fact, we are one of the first Parcel SDK, consumer facing Parcel SDK customers. Yeah.
yeah, it looks like Meta's AI division, Meta, formerly known as Facebook Incorporated, is using Oasis Parcel as well. So that's interesting. So, like I guess in practice, like what does this actually mean? I do the brain dumps, right? I'm training the model by providing data and I guess maybe telling it what I want. At the end of the day, like I want an AMA bot, basically, a version of Derek to go into Telegram and answer these questions this time, this date, whatever. And so I guess the model, right, the training model, the software on your side obviously has access to the data, or else this whole thing doesn't work. But otherwise, within Personal.ai, Oasis Labs, etc., nobody else can see the data unless I actually provide some sort of view key or read write key. Is that more or less how it works, or do I have it completely wrong?
No, it's more or less like how it works. So essentially, think about, you go create an account. When you go create an account with, let's say, Google, right? Essentially, you are, storing your passwords on Google servers. And yes, of course, Google is pretty good in terms of providing like two-factor authentication and, things of that nature. But ultimately, an administrator on, server side technically can go in and look at the data. With basically this implementation with Parcel SDK and Oasis, we remove ourselves out of that equation, right? We give that control entirely to that individual person or to that user. So essentially, you can go to like Oasis stewardship and you can say, okay, Personal AI has access to it or not have access to it, and there is no human involved. Um, and it's as simple as that. And of course, given the keys are on the blockchain, if you can trace down the keys on the blockchain, that's great. But yeah, technically, it's impossible to trace. Very similar to how people lost billions of dollars on Bitcoin because their keys are lost. It's the same thing. Um, so for us, it's almost like, we are a consumer facing like product first and utility first kind of company. The way we tell to users is, hey, look, this is like almost having a physical key to your home. Unless and until you lose it or you give it to somebody else, nobody will have access, to enter your home. So it's more or less the same thing.
And like, is there any sort of model at Personal.ai of like, I need tech support and it's like something super, super deep, like I can make a view key and provide access to at least a portion of the data so that you can help me figure out what's going on?
Yeah. So what you would need to do is in settings, we have something called like, delegated access or collaborative
Okay.
access that will basically create a temporary key to have another human on the Personal AI side to go into and kind of help tune your data. For example, we work with like many different thought leaders, who would want like, hey, I want to understand how to structure my AMA on this specific topic. Like, how do I do that? So yeah, so there are like mechanisms to be able to do that, but still you would have to take explicit actions to, Suman to go into your account and look at things, and you can remove it once that, support or like whatever thing is complete. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's really cool. Are there any maybe misconceptions around this that we should address? Like, I can imagine somebody's yelling at their car speakers right now, being like, no, we can't do this because XYZ. And maybe you have like a really good counter for that of like, no, that's not actually how it works. It works like this instead.
Yeah, I think most of the misconceptions revolve around um, this general idea of like, okay, so where exactly is the data, right? And unfortunately, there isn't like a simple way to say, um, the nitty gritty details of how the blockchain works, but uh, the idea of like losing your key is not entirely true, because there is obviously custodian wallets, non-custodian wallets, um, and this Oasis Labs implementation of the parcel, I would still consider a custodian wallet, but even Oasis is trying to remove themselves out of the equation. So I think it gets into the details of, oh, but hey, what if I lose my key? Do I lose all my data, right? Um, so I think the only one thing I would say is, um, if people start to generally understand that this idea of using blockchain technologies is a greater control to people, because it is not technically stored on like any server, and it is not dependent on policies that a corporation has to put together for administrator to go in and approval process. As long as there is a human involved that can decrypt a key or access your account, it is still not as secure as blockchain is. Um,
Right.
so yeah, so I think it's just the acceptance of, okay, blockchain is indeed secure, and there is a brand problem as well, I feel, given every blockchain technology is simply associated with the market volatility, which is not entirely true.
Right.
Market volatility has to do with the business, with the project, with people investing and people like harvesting things, and those digital assets are entirely different from the core foundation of what blockchain actually provides. Financial ecosystem, Bitcoin is an implementation on top of like a blockchain technology. So I think there is a little bit of not necessarily misconception. I think there is a understanding and awareness problem that exists generally in the world, that blockchain is not equal to crypto, or blockchain is not like a coin.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it will take time over a period of over a period for consumers to really understand. It's simple. What is the difference between like a technology versus a coin or a token? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, that's fair. Um, I mentioned earlier about potentially doing that brain dump and having it help me spit out a book. At some point, like, is that part of what you're trying to achieve? Like, help people write better? You mentioned somebody could go in there and help and try to work with the AI to figure out how to structure an AMA. Like, is business proposal, white papers, maybe research papers, like working with the AI collaboratively to make those things better, or even to start from scratch?
Exactly, right. So the interesting thing about personal AI is it's not a pre-trained model. In other words, we are not defining uh, what that AI will do. Your data, your brain dump is deciding what AI will be capable of doing. So let's take an example. Let's take an example of 4 a.m. AMA, right? So that's kind of your goal. So for that AMA, you probably have some scope of knowledge. People want to talk to you because you have the knowledge and you have the context, you have something in your brain that is needs to be extracted. So if you think about training your AI, so it's like, what? There will likely be around a span of like 200 questions or 300 questions that people normally ask. There are probably like around 100 different topics that people will want to talk to, right? So over a period of time, if you have existing data, that's great. Or if you don't, like if you start thinking about like answering those questions in a much more detailed manner, or brainstorming with your own AI on those topics, that eventually this AMA, when people ask you things, it will it has that information to be able to synthesize and construct a response. uh,
Right.
is a good use case. In the writing side is even more amazing, right? This idea of the brain dump is fantastic, because even if you like think about writing it down, you will forget like where you wrote it down, or you will forget the uh, uh, all the things that you probably have consumed on the internet that will ultimately or eventually influence your thinking in writing,
Right.
in the thought leadership, in producing that book. So when you think about like this brain term, it has to be simulated similar to how you are experiencing your creation, your consumption in that moment over a period of time. So you have this brain term and you go into your writing editor. You basically have your model. You technically put your own AI into collaborating mode, or auto suggesting mode, or auto prediction mode. That is no different than, hey Suman, let's work together on this book on the Google Docs, right? and then I come over and then you write something, and I'll probably have some comments or suggestions around it. So it's
Yeah.
literally your own AI that you are working with that is surfacing ideas for you, information for you, uh, from your own, like, past, synthesized, not just like fetching the information from a like a search mode, but contextually understanding and synthesizing. This may be an interesting thought for you to incorporate, and then of
Right.
course you know choose to add a session or not add a session and edit it further. But you are working with your own AI.
But almost at least from that perspective, it almost sounds like Google Docs or Microsoft Word, because I know they've worked in some ML suggestions, but like on steroids and very much focused on you and things you've said or you've provided, to
Yep,
personal.ai as part of your things I've said in the past. Um, that's really
absolutely.
cool. What actual what formats of data does the model accept? Like, can I say, hey, this is me doing a talk on YouTube, listen, to the like get a transcript, make a transcript, listen to the words, etc. Um, upload an MP3 like this one and say this is my voice, not the other one. Um, text is probably an obvious one, but like what else can I feed into it that will help build the model and make it more like me?
Yeah. So let's break it down. So at the higher level, there are three modes of like data types, which is text. The second is audio, and the third is like videos and images. Right? Text is pretty obvious, so you can imagine integrating into your Drive for the Google Docs, for URLs like blog links, any textual information that you can possibly imagine. You can integrate with it, and there is continuous stream of integrations that we are doing. Um, Starting with basically Drive or Twitter. You can also plug in with Twitter as well. So that's one. The second thing is audio. So audio, you have in the forms of podcasts, in the forms of like maybe Zoom recordings or meetings or MP3s or YouTube podcasts. All of these are possible. And one thing we do is, because it's a personal AI, we actually capture your voice identity, and we will give the users an option on, do you want to be trained on everything that is Suman is saying, or you want to be trained on like Derek's saying. So you basically will have control and optionality on uh, you know I still consumed it, so I want to be trained on everything, right? So that's
Right.
on the audio side. uh, on the image and visual side, we do have mechanisms to basically push out images and video, but we are not yet modeling uh, the visual side. We are currently focused very much on replicating your mind and the knowledge. But eventually, given our memory stack data structure and how things are structured, the data is being captured as of today. That will eventually unlock use cases such as, in your AMA, let's say your AI constructs a response, but it also has a constructed or generated image, or maybe simply uh, providing a visual clip or a visual image that is relevant from with your own mind. It will also spit that out. But that's probably like 1-2 years down the road. Current focus is more on the knowledge and the constructing of the responses from the AI. Make sense?
Yeah, I'm just thinking like I could make my own VTuber, but actually still be me and not some anime character. Potentially. I don't know. And even just for you to say 1 or 2 years down the road is mind blowing, because this is the sort of thing that's always, oh, it's going to be ready in like 5 to 10 years. It's going to be ready in 5 to 10 years. But we've seen with GPT-3, Stable Diffusion, Dolly and Dolly 2, um, Meta just released their, what was it, text to
Yep.
video, or make a video or whatever they're calling it, which is super janky still, but like it works. Like horse running down a beach. Like, yeah, it's very
Yeah.
small resolution. It's only a few frames per second, but that's what most GIFs on the internet are. Like they're low resolution and they're few frames per second because you want it to be like under 100 kilobytes ideally in most situations, so that anybody in the world can easily download it instead of like a 5 megabyte GIF. Um, so
Yeah.
like it's
I mean,
highly
that's a good point,
usable
right?
in that format.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, that's a really good point, because like if you see what's happening macro, right? Okay, Stable Diffusion comes in, I'm actually good friends with Imad. I've been watching, working on Mid Journey for a while now, and then all of a sudden, like, once they release the Stable Diffusion, it kind of that takes off. But
Yeah.
interesting thing is people has been working on these things for a long period of time, right? And then when it surfaces, it's like, oh shit, like it's here. But I think, and now there is obviously a tendency, a push towards like this openness, right? So you saw immediately after Stable Diffusion, OpenAI pushes their DALI for everybody, and then Meta does something, and I'm sure you can anticipate what Google and Microsoft might be doing as well. But that's probably like in a few weeks. But the more interesting thing is, where things are headed to. So from my perspective, right, and the biggest difference, or at least like what we are trying to achieve, which in a way the macro AI trends will help us, is this core focus on like personal AI versus general AI, right? So let's say GPT-3. GPT-3 is amazing. Like it's a 120 billion parameter like model, and then it's very creative, and it's all trained on internet of data, right? But imagine that kind of capability that is kind of replicating on the individual side, like individual perspectives, right? What is my perspective of what I think about the blockchain and what internet thinks about it, right? I think that's the magical piece that we are trying to unlock, which is like really focusing in. And these models are not huge because the focus and the corpus of the data is individual. These are small models, but these are still individual models, right? So there is a big, large model, I think, push that is happening. And ourselves, our goal is like pushing this micro model that is more focused on individual perspectives, not like how much data we can squeeze into one model. So the essentially like three things that are happening in the whole like metaverse space. One is our virtual human being space. One is replicating like your expressions, your face, in the avatars, right? You mentioned, and that itself is like another model or visual model to take your videos and kind of replicate your style, and how do you make like a digital twin of Obama to be able to speak? So that's like one track itself. And the second one is a voice replication, which is, how does, Donald Trump speaks and his voice, and then, make funny jokes on how does, attaching it to Obama, right? So there is that track.
Yeah.
And the third track is there's like, replicating your minds with your knowledge, which is personal AI. So I think like as we push forward over like 5 to 10 years horizon, all these three would be converging, right? So technically, you can imagine Derek's avatar that looks like you, feels like you, expression like you, movements like you, which has a voice of you, with a digital mind of you, right? So the
Literally my
24/7
digital
AMA
twin.
doesn't have to be in yeah. So it doesn't have to be in like what do you call AMA in Telegram. It could be an AMA in Metaverse, which is a fuller and richer and immersive experience, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
those things are inevitable, but it's not like one company is doing it. There are multiple different parallel tracks that are happening, and that convergence is inevitable.
And we hit the singularity, and then the AI takes over, and we all die. The AGI, artificial general intelligence, takes over, and then we all die,
Okay,
and then we
okay.
end up in the Matrix.
So
No, I'm just.
I
I
have,
mean, that's obviously the very dystopian version of that. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I have like ranted on that as well. Like the idea of AGI is great because it's a dystopian, and then we can make like a lot of science fiction movies around it. But if you just flip that idea into, hey, uh, not AGI but API, like meaning artificial personal intelligence, right? So this general intelligence that something is taking over versus, holy shit, like I have my own artificial personal intelligence that is my assets, like I have control, and then multiply that with billions of people, and then fast forward to 100 years. How the history is understood from an individual perspective is totally different
Yeah.
than how an AGI understands the history of collective memory, because a collective memory is never giving you an individual perspective of what your life is and what you imagine things are, right? um, so I believe there is a second wave that is happening. In a way, we are probably one of the proponents of it, which is this artificial personal intelligence, and let bring that AI goodness to benefit human beings and replicate that and scale that.
I mean, this is already referred to as your second brain. I'm holding my phone for anybody listening on audio, my iPhone 13 Pro, and it very much is in a lot of cases, especially if you use a notes app and your calendar app to a great degree. Like, not everything is in my notes app, but like a lot of important stuff is in there. My calendar has birthdays and reminders and appointments, and like, if I need to go back and look, like, what were you doing on September 24th at this time, I can tell you probably, because especially if I was, if I can especially tell you if I was home or if I was overseas or something like that, because I've got just about everything on there, and it's helpful because I have so much going on. I need it. If I don't have it, the number of times I need to remind myself that something is happening, like tomorrow at 4 p.m., is just ridiculous. Um,
Mhm.
is there a future where Amazon, Google, Apple, Samsung abandoned Bixby, so I won't mention them, but like where I can actually plug Siri or Google Assistant or Amazon's A word into this and make it even smarter, but contextually and just for me? Or do you think those are such closed ecosystems? Or maybe the risks are too great, potentially, to let Google, Apple, Amazon have access to that data. That it's a bad idea. Where do you have you thought about that? And if so, where do you fall on those lines?
Yeah. So I believe that intersection will happen on the interfaces, not necessarily on the models of the data.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that? You probably will have a mechanism where you can talk to your personal AI on your Alexa device, right? Or Google Assistant device. But it is highly unlikely that a individual person would want to give all their memory stack into Alexa device and let them use it. And that's the whole reason why this is possible from a company that is building from the ground up, which is a startup, which is like has the core principles and the foundations of how the data is managed and how the uh, uh, experience is created for those people, right? So I think there will be a larger ecosystem play that the big tech will likely have touch points into it, but it will not change the fundamentals and the principles of how you create your own personal AI, which I think is really important, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I don't think about it as much as like competition, because every company that exists out there which does like general models, like such as Google, such as Amazon, Siri, they have their own needs, which is like business efficiencies, which is locking into your ecosystem, which is drawing more people to buy the same devices, um, and it all is geared towards, if yes, creating some consumer experience, which is great, but still it's benefiting the business and the platform, not necessarily the individual,
Right.
right? So I think we are too far away from thinking, oh, yes, this is a tech company. If Google can put all these amounts of money, they can create like potentially personalized algorithms, but they need to change their business. They need to change their fundamental, like, there's a trust factor that needs to be done.
Yeah, that's the
There's
big
like,
one.
so a lot of foundational elements. Yeah, so.
Um, can I,
So yeah, that's kind of how I see it.
if I, maybe I think I'll make a feature request. If there's a
Go ahead.
point in time where I can go into like the Siri feature, or like, I don't know, Personal.ai has a mobile app, and I can log in there and like connect it to Siri so that Siri can access the data, and therefore
Mhm.
when I ask a question, Derek's information response. Can I just give it a different voice? Because I don't really want to talk to myself.
uh, yeah, sure. I mean, we'll give you that feature
Okay,
because it's in our roadmap.
perfect.
But
Okay, good.
so the idea of the, yeah, yeah, the voice cloning, I think is getting like good, good amount of maturity in terms of the models and how much data is needed. The good news for us is we don't have to build all the core technologies that we would need. There are companies, and I won't mention the big techs, who are potentially thinking about open sourcing those kinds of things as well, which is amazing, because then, hey, Derek, we can essentially provide a podcast of yours and create a model that actually sounds like you.
Yeah.
Uh, so perfect. We will integrate into your personal AI. Our core secret sauce is our like this aggregation of multiple different models, which are like foundational models that replicates the personal behavior and the personal style and the knowledge of one person, not necessarily, voice cloning or avatar cloning, if you will.
Fair enough. Um, Suman, thank you very much for your time. We've gone a little bit over here, but I think we got some really, really good information there, and we already talked a little bit about where you see this potentially going over the next few years and 100 years even, and kind of impact potential implications there. But I'll give you a second to plug where people can go. Like, where did they go to learn more about Personal.ai? Maybe to see and hear things you have to say about AI in general, or other things, whether you have your own newsletter or Twitter account.
Yeah, Personal.ai is obviously, the place to go. And my AI is Suman.ai, Suman.ai, as simple as that. So if you want to play with it, it's still like
Oh,
I'm continuing to train on it, but people can actually interact and try it out. But more importantly, I would essentially encourage listeners to like start training their AIs, because you can also think about it as like taking control of your internet presence and the data back into yourself. Because if the you know big tech starts to shut down, you still have your control on your own data, and make use of it. So it's kind of like one suggestion that I would have, which is take control of your own data, take control of your own models, and start putting AI to the benefit of you. Um, and this is your digital asset, which probably you will transfer to your kids and ownership to some other people, right? It will live in the cloud forever.
I am immortal now. This is way better than keeping my head in a jar. Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, yeah, so I went to, see, now we're going over even more. I went to Suman.ai, it redirected me to Suman.personal.ai, and like I can, after I give you a little bit of data, I can interact with you. That's very interesting. I will definitely give this a shot. And there's other personal AIs here too that I can message. So I'm definitely gonna have some fun with this, and I look forward to creating my own, because
Yeah,
I could free up a lot of my time potentially. So it'll be like
yeah.
a nice little weekend project.
Yeah, all those are like just for exploring and demo AIs, primarily because kind of gives a good sense of it. But at the same time, think about it. Like you and me would probably talk about in the context of AI and Web3, right? Because that's our shared knowledge. But somebody else would be talking to me about blind community. Uh, so I think the experience is almost your personal relationship with those people, because if you have like a random person coming to Suman.ai, is like, what the hell do I do here, like where do
Yeah.
I start from, right? So it's again goes into that fundamental trust of like that connection, and okay, now I can talk about AI and Web3 with Suman, say, and kind of see what it thinks about. But it's a continuous process. It's not like one model and being done with it. It's continuously evolving.
Yeah, that's terrific. I'm looking forward to playing with it. If
Yeah.
anybody else is not terribly risk averse, or is willing to take Suman's word for it that the data is private, secure, stored with Oasis through Oasis Parcel, then definitely give it a shot as well. And look forward to seeing where this heads. This is really exciting, and eventually I think I want to see it sick it on my girlfriend and see if I can trick her into thinking that she's actually talking to me. But that will require a little bit more training. Suman, thanks a lot for your time today, and looking forward to seeing what happens next. And for everybody listening or watching, until next time, stay free.